"Excuse me, but this clause is a trap," said the black maid. And the Mafia boss lost his smile. Emma's hands trembled as she carefully adjusted the wine bottle in her hand, the soft, faint sound of the glass making contact with the crystal as she poured the rich red liquid. Her eyes flicked nervously to the contract spread out on the table before her. She had been working as a maid in the Romano mansion for the last few months, but today, everything felt different. She had noticed something odd in the contract, an ambiguous clause that, to anyone who didn't know better, seemed harmless enough. But Emma knew better. She knew that every word in this document was crafted with a purpose that could end up ruining everything for the people involved. As she stood there, her mind raced, trying to make sense of the legal jargon. Her gaze shifted to the man seated at the end of the table, Dante Romano, the Mafia boss. He was speaking to his associates, completely oblivious to the danger brewing in front of him. The contract was a trap, and if he signed it, he would be stuck. Emma could feel the weight of the moment. She had always kept her head down, always stayed in the background. She had no right to intervene in matters like this. But today, she couldn't stay silent. She glanced once more at the contract before meeting Dante's eyes. He was still deep in conversation with his men, but the brief moment of eye contact sent a chill through her spine. He had noticed her hesitation. She couldn't let this go. "Excuse me, sir," she finally whispered, her voice barely audible. Dante looked up, his sharp gaze locking onto hers. She could feel the weight of his stare, like he was seeing straight through her. "Yes?" he asked, his tone cold, authoritative. Emma took a deep breath. "This clause, it's a trap," she said, her voice steady now, though her heart raced. The words hung in the air between them for a moment, and the room seemed to fall into a tense silence. Dante's expression flickered. The briefest flash of surprise crossed his features before he regained his composure. "What did you say?" he asked, his voice softer now, but there was an edge to it. The room was still. His associates glanced at each other, their faces blank, unreadable. Emma's chest tightened, but she stood her ground. She was done being invisible. "The clause in this contract, it's deliberately vague. It gives one party an unfair advantage," she said, her words carefully chosen. Dante's gaze darkened. His eyes narrowed, and for the first time, she saw a flicker of uncertainty. "And who are you to tell me about contracts?" he asked, his tone sharp. But there was something different now, something almost intrigued in his eyes. Emma swallowed, her throat dry. I studied law," she explained, the words coming out before she could stop herself. "I was a law student before she trailed off, the weight of her past lingering in the air. Dante studied her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Emma could feel her palms growing sweaty as the silence stretched on. Then, finally, he spoke. "Explain," he said quietly. "Tell me what you see in this." Emma's heart pounded in her chest as she bent over the contract, pointing out the specific clauses that were designed to trap him. She watched as Dante's expression shifted, his eyes flicking over the words with increasing intensity. For the first time since she had met him, he was actually listening. The room remained quiet, the weight of his attention on her heavy, but somehow comforting. As she finished explaining, Dante's gaze slowly shifted from the contract to her face. His lips twitched slightly, but it wasn't a smile. It was something else, something Emma couldn't quite place. Then, finally, he leaned back in his chair and let out a slow breath. "You've done well," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. The surprise in his voice was evident, but there was something else too, respect. Emma blinked, stunned. She had expected anger, perhaps even dismissal. But instead, Dante seemed impressed. His face softened ever so slightly, and for a fleeting moment, Emma felt something shift between them. She had done the impossible. She had changed the course of their lives with a few well-chosen words. And for the first time, Dante Romano wasn't the untouchable boss. He was just a man, surprised by the intelligence of the woman standing before him. Emma stood there, her breath shallow, as Dante's piercing gaze remained fixed on her. It was a rare moment. For the first time since she had started working in this mansion, she wasn't just another servant. She wasn't invisible. She wasn't being dismissed as just another face. The boss, the powerful Mafia boss who controlled the city, was listening to her, really listening. The contract lay open in front of them, the carefully chosen clauses now exposed for what they truly were, a trap. Emma's fingers trembled as she gently pushed the document towards him, as if showing him the danger, one clause at a time. She could feel her pulse quickening. It wasn't just the contract. It was the weight of the moment. For the first time, she felt like she had control, like she was the one in charge. This part here, Emma pointed. This clause about arbitration? It means you're locked in with them. They can sue you in court, but you can't do the same. It's a one-way street. If they break the contract, you're stuck. She paused, waiting for Dante to absorb the information. His eyes flicked from the contract to her face. She could see his jaw tighten, the anger building inside him. But there was something else too. Something Emma had never expected, a flicker of admiration. "And you're sure about this?" he asked quietly, his voice steady but tinged with something Emma couldn't place. She nodded, swallowing hard. "I'm sure. I know how these things work. I've studied contracts like this. They're designed to trap you, to make sure you can never escape." Dante stared at her, his expression unreadable. The silence between them stretched, thick and heavy, as if the entire room was waiting for him to say something, anything. Then, finally, he spoke, his voice lower than before. "You're not just a maid, are you?" Emma didn't know how to answer. She had never planned for this, never expected that her past would catch up with her in this way. But she was here now, and it was too late to hide. She swallowed, her heart racing. "I was a law student," she said quietly, almost as if the words were too big for her to say out loud. "I had to leave when things became too difficult. But I know contracts. I understand the law." Dante didn't look surprised. He just nodded slowly, taking in her words. "I didn't know," he muttered, more to himself than to her. "I've had lawyers look over this contract, but none of them saw this." Emma felt a small flicker of pride, but she didn't let it show. She couldn't afford to get emotional now. She had to stay focused. They were looking at it from the surface. They didn't see what's hidden beneath. "And you did," Dante said, his voice a mix of respect and something else, something she couldn't quite decipher. "I did," Emma replied, her voice steady. She met his gaze, not flinching, not backing down. She had come this far, and she wasn't about to stop now. The tension in the room was palpable. Dante's eyes locked onto hers, and for a moment, it felt like the world had shrunk down to just the two of them. The Mafia boss and the maid who had just saved his empire with nothing but her sharp mind. Finally, Dante stood up, pushing the chair back with a quiet scrape. Emma watched as he moved around the table, his every step calculated, precise. He stopped in front of her, his towering presence intimidating as always. But there was something different in the air now. Something that wasn't there before. "You've earned my respect," he said quietly, his voice calm, but full of an intensity that made Emma's heart skip a beat. "And I don't give that easily." Emma didn't know how to respond. She had expected anger, maybe even contempt, but respect? From someone like him? She felt a rush of emotions she couldn't quite name. "I didn't do it for respect," she said, the words slipping out before she could stop them. Dante gave her a small, almost imperceptible smile. "I know," he said softly, "but it's what you've earned." The air between them shifted. There was still the cold distance between their social standings, the clear divide between his power and her position. But now, for the first time, Emma felt like she wasn't just a maid. She wasn't just a servant in his house. She was someone who had made a difference. She was someone who had changed the course of this man's life. "What happens now?" Emma asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Dante didn't answer immediately. He just stared at her for a long moment, his dark eyes unreadable. Then, finally, he spoke, his tone firm and decisive. "Now you stay. You've proven yourself. And I don't make mistakes when it comes to people who can think like you." Emma's heart pounded in her chest, but she kept her face impassive. She had done it. She had stood up to him, to the Mafia boss, and come out victorious. And now, her life was about to change in ways she couldn't even begin to understand. "Stay," she echoed. Dante nodded. "Yes, stay. I'll make sure you're taken care of. You'll have a position in my organization." Emma's mind raced. She had no idea what that meant, but one thing was certain. This was the beginning of something new, something that would change everything for her. She wasn't just the maid anymore. She was someone to be reckoned with. The following days in the mansion felt like a dream to Emma. The atmosphere had shifted completely. What had once been an oppressive, cold environment now seemed filled with a strange mix of anticipation and respect. She was no longer just another face among the staff. Dante's words echoed in her mind every time she walked through the halls. You've earned my respect. She hadn't known it was possible to feel such a weight lifted from her shoulders, but it had happened. Each time Emma passed Dante in the hall, his gaze would follow her, and for the first time, she didn't feel like she was invisible. Instead, there was an unspoken understanding between them. He had seen her for who she truly was. And now, Emma was left wondering what to do with this new reality. One evening, a few days after their encounter, Dante called her into his office. She had grown used to the formality of his commands, but this time felt different. There was a quiet urgency in his tone that she had never heard before. Emma stood in the doorway, hesitant but composed, waiting for him to speak. "Come in, Emma," he said, looking up from the papers scattered across his desk. "I need to speak with you about something important." The weight of his words made her heart race. What could this be about? She stepped inside, closing the door gently behind her. Dante gestured to the chair in front of his desk. "Please, have a seat." As she sat down, she noticed the tension in his shoulders, the furrow in his brow. Something was clearly bothering him, and for the first time, Emma felt the urge to reach out. "Is everything all right?" she asked softly. Dante looked up, his dark eyes meeting hers. There was a brief pause before he answered. "I've been thinking a lot about our conversation the other day. You're right, Emma. This contract, it's a mess. And now I realize how much I've been ignoring the small details, the ones that could lead to a downfall." His voice was calm, but there was a trace of frustration hidden beneath it. "But it's not just that. I've been running this business, this life, with so much focus on power, on control. I've lost sight of what's really important, people." Emma's heart tightened as she listened to him. She had never heard Dante speak this way. His usual cold, calculating demeanor was gone, replaced by something she couldn't quite place. It was vulnerability, but not the kind she had expected. This wasn't a man broken by weakness. This was a man who had come to a realization, a man who was finally seeing the truth. "You've built something incredible here," Emma said quietly, her voice full of sincerity. "But no empire can stand if it doesn't have a solid foundation. You're right. It's not just about power. It's about trust, loyalty, and doing what's right." Dante smiled faintly, his expression softening just a little. "I never thought I'd hear that from you. A maid with more wisdom than I ever expected," he said with a chuckle, but there was no mockery in his voice. "Just respect. You've given me a lot to think about, Emma. I want you to stay. Not just as a maid, but in a role where your intelligence is valued. You don't deserve to be in the background anymore. You deserve to be where you can make a real difference." Emma blinked in surprise. "I don't know what to say," she murmured, unsure how to respond to such an offer. "You don't need to say anything right now," Dante interrupted, his gaze steady. "Just think about it. You've earned the chance to be more. You've earned my trust." For a moment, neither of them spoke. The silence between them was thick with the weight of what had been said. Emma could feel her mind racing. She had never considered anything like this before. To be seen, not just as someone who served, but as someone who had something valuable to offer. It was overwhelming, and yet, in some strange way, it felt right. Dante leaned back in his chair, his eyes never leaving hers. "I know this is a big decision. Take your time. But know this, Emma. You'll always have a place here, no matter what you choose." She nodded slowly, still processing the enormity of his words. She had never imagined this kind of future for herself, not in a million years. Yet here she was, being offered something she hadn't even known she wanted. The opportunity to change her life, to step out from the shadows and into the light. As Emma left Dante's office that night, her thoughts were a whirlwind. What did it mean to truly be seen? What did it mean to have someone like Dante, a man who had controlled so much of the city, trust her enough to offer her a new life? She didn't have the answers yet, but for the first time in a long while, Emma felt like she was standing on the edge of something huge, something that could change everything. And she wasn't afraid. The following week, Emma found herself in a world that felt both exhilarating and terrifying. Dante's offer had changed everything, but with that change came uncertainty. Her life in the mansion had been a series of calculated steps, keeping her head down, doing her job, staying invisible. But now, things were different. Now, she was expected to step up, to be more than just a maid, more than just someone who served in the shadows. She was expected to think, to lead, to help guide the future of an empire. The weight of it all settled heavily on her shoulders. Emma had been given an opportunity, but with that opportunity came responsibility. She had no idea what to expect. She had no idea how to navigate this new path, but she knew one thing for sure. She wasn't going to let it slip away. As the days passed, Emma started working closely with Dante's team, learning the ins and outs of the business. She was amazed at how quickly she adapted to this new role. She had always been sharp, but now, more than ever, she was using every ounce of her intelligence. Every detail, every decision mattered. She was making a difference. Dante was there too, overseeing her progress. He watched her closely, always encouraging, never rushing her. He was patient, which, for someone like him, was rare. Dante never let his guard down, but there was something about Emma that made him trust her. He knew she had something more to offer, something that most people didn't even realize they had. Every time Emma looked at him, she saw the man behind the power. There was a vulnerability there, something he didn't show the world. She had never imagined that a man like Dante could have such depth, such complexity. But as they worked together, as they spent more time in each other's presence, she began to understand him better. Dante wasn't just the ruthless mafia boss everyone feared. He was a man with a past, a man who had built an empire out of necessity, not desire. Emma had never been one to judge. She had her own struggles, her own story. But seeing Dante like this, seeing him as more than just a powerful figure, changed everything for her. One evening, after a long day of meetings, Emma found herself sitting across from Dante in his office. The room was quiet, the only sound the soft hum of the air conditioning. Dante was reviewing some documents, his eyes focused, his expression unreadable. Emma had gotten used to the quiet moments they shared. They had become something of a routine. There was something comforting about being in the same space, not talking, just working. It felt natural. She had never imagined that this kind of silence could be so meaningful. Finally, Dante broke the silence. "You've been doing well," he said, his voice low. "Better than I expected." Emma looked up, meeting his gaze. "Thank you," she replied, her voice steady. "I'm just trying to do what's right." Dante's lips quirked slightly. "You've done more than that. You've earned my trust. And that's not something I give easily." Emma felt a warmth spread through her chest at his words. She hadn't expected to hear that. Not from him. She had always felt like an outsider, like she didn't belong in a world like this. But here he was, telling her that she had earned his trust. "I just want to help," she said softly. "I want to make a difference." Dante nodded, his expression softening for a brief moment. "You already have," he said, his voice sincere. "And I think you're going to do more than you realize. You've got potential, Emma, more than most people." His words lingered in the air, and for the first time, Emma felt like she wasn't just part of the furniture. She wasn't just someone who moved through the mansion in silence. She was seen. She was valued. And in this world, that was rare. But as much as Dante had changed his attitude toward her, Emma couldn't forget the reality of the world they were in. This wasn't a fairy tale. It wasn't a place where dreams came true. It was a world of power, of danger, of constant threats. She had to be careful, had to keep her wits about her. She couldn't let herself get caught up in the idea that this was her new life. Because at any moment, it could all come crashing down. As the days went on, Emma's relationship with Dante evolved. They began to trust each other more, share more. Dante started to confide in her, telling her about his past, about the things that had shaped him into the man he was today. She listened, absorbing every word. He had been through things she couldn't even begin to imagine. And in return, Emma began to share pieces of her own story. She told him about her dreams of becoming a lawyer, about the sacrifices she had made, about the pain of losing her family. It was the first time she had opened up to anyone in years. And yet, there was still a part of her that remained closed off, a part that couldn't let go of the fear that had been ingrained in her for so long. Dante wasn't the type of man to push for answers, to demand more than someone was willing to give. He respected her boundaries, and in return, she respected him. But one evening, as they were working late together, the atmosphere in the room shifted. Dante looked at her with a seriousness she had never seen before. "I'm not going to lie to you, Emma," he said, his voice low. "This life, this world, it's dangerous. And it's going to get even more dangerous. But I want you to know something. No matter what happens, I will always protect you. I owe you that much." Emma's heart skipped a beat at his words. She had never expected Dante to say something like that. In a world like this, where power was everything, loyalty was often a luxury. But here he was, offering her something she never thought she would have, security. And for the first time in her life, Emma realized that she wasn't alone anymore. She had a place in this world. And Dante, the man who had once seemed like an unreachable figure, was now someone she could trust. The days that followed were a blur for Emma. She had settled into her new role with surprising ease. It wasn't just the work itself that had changed, it was everything about how she viewed herself, how she viewed Dante. The shift in their dynamic was subtle, yet profound. She no longer walked the halls of the Romano mansion as just a maid. Now, she was part of something bigger, something more significant. Emma had been tasked with organizing some of the mansion's affairs, not just cleaning and serving as she had before. The papers Dante had entrusted her with were more than just contracts. They were the keys to understanding how his empire functioned, how he managed his power, and how fragile that power truly was. Every day, Emma grew more familiar with the inner workings of his world. She had access to information she never could have dreamed of before. She was learning, growing, and finding her place in this strange new world. Dante's trust in her was evident. He didn't just rely on her to handle the day-to-day tasks. He sought her opinion on decisions, big and small. He began to ask her for her thoughts on matters that affected not just his business, but his personal life. It was in those quiet moments, when the two of them sat together, going over plans or documents, that Emma realized just how much had changed between them. He wasn't just the cold, distant Mafia boss she had first met. She had seen glimpses of the man behind the power, the vulnerabilities, the humanity. And it was in those moments that Emma felt a deeper connection to him, something that went beyond respect. It was a bond forged in trust, understanding, and shared purpose. Still, the fear of the life they were leading was never far from Emma's mind. As much as things had changed, as much as she felt like she was starting a new chapter, there was always the constant reminder of the danger that lurked in the world they inhabited. The Mafia was not a world where people just walked away unscathed. She had seen it in the way Dante's men operated, in the quiet but palpable tension that followed him everywhere he went. She had witnessed the consequences of betrayal, the quiet whispers of rivals plotting in the shadows. Dante was powerful, yes, but his power came with a price. And Emma knew, deep down, that this world was not one where you could ever truly relax. She couldn't forget her past, the struggles that had brought her here, and the sacrifices she had made. She had learned to survive by staying invisible, by never drawing attention to herself. But now, with Dante, she was seen. And that was a double-edged sword. One evening, as they worked late into the night, Emma found herself deep in thought. She had been reading through a series of reports when Dante walked in. He looked weary, the weight of the day clearly visible on his face. But when his eyes met hers, there was something different about his expression. "You're still here?" he asked, his voice soft, almost amused. Emma smiled faintly. "I've got work to do," she said, trying to keep the conversation light. Dante didn't say anything at first. He just stood there, watching her for a moment. Then, he walked over to her desk, leaning casually against it. "You've been doing well, Emma," he said, his voice quieter than usual. "Better than I ever expected." Emma looked up at him, surprised by the sincerity in his words. She had always known he respected her mind, but hearing him say it so plainly caught her off guard. "Thank you," she replied, her voice steady but soft. "I'm just doing my best." Dante nodded, his gaze lingering on her for a moment longer before he turned away. "I know you are," he said, more to himself than to her. There was a long silence between them before he spoke again. "I trust you, Emma, more than anyone else." Emma felt her heart skip a beat at his words. It was strange to hear him say that. Dante had always been guarded, never one to show much emotion. But now, there was an openness in his voice that made her feel like she was seeing a different side of him. "You've earned that trust," she said. Quietly, Dante paused, his back still turned to her. He seemed to be lost in thought for a moment before he finally spoke again. "I don't just give my trust to anyone, Emma. You know that." Emma nodded. She knew. She had seen the way Dante operated, the cold, calculating way he made decisions. He didn't trust easily. "I know," she replied softly. "And I won't let you down." For a moment, the two of them stood in silence, the only sound the rustling of papers and the quiet hum of the mansion's lights. Then, Dante turned back to her, his expression more serious now. I mean it, Emma. You're not just a maid anymore. You're part of this, part of what I'm building. Don't forget that. Emma met his gaze, her heart pounding in her chest. For the first time, she felt like she truly belonged. In this world of power and danger, where loyalty and trust were everything, she had found a place for herself. And it wasn't just as a maid. It was as someone who mattered. Emma woke up early the next morning, the sunlight barely touching the edges of the mansion's curtains. It had been a long night of paperwork and meetings, but her mind raced even after the hours spent in Dante's office. She had been given more than just a role. She had been entrusted with something far more valuable. She was now part of something bigger. The weight of that responsibility was heavier than she had anticipated. As she got ready for the day, Emma couldn't shake the feeling that things were changing, not just in the mansion, but within her. She was no longer the same person who had arrived here months ago. The quiet, invisible woman had given way to someone who was becoming a powerful force in Dante's world. She had found her place, and she was determined to make the most of it. Walking through the grand hallways of the mansion, Emma could feel the eyes of the staff on her. They no longer saw her as just another maid. They saw her as someone important. The whispers were there, of course, the quiet murmurs of curiosity. But Emma wasn't concerned about them. She had other things to focus on. As she approached the office, she was greeted by Marco, one of Dante's trusted men, who opened the door. For her. Morning, Miss Emma, he said with a nod. The boss is waiting for you. Emma returned his nod, but her mind was already elsewhere. The office was quiet as usual, but Dante was standing by the window, looking out at the city. His posture was relaxed, but his eyes were sharp. When he heard her footsteps, he turned and gave her a small smile. Good morning, Emma, he said, his voice calm. I've got a few things we need to go over today. Are you ready? Always, Emma replied, her voice steady. Dante motioned for her to sit at the desk, and they got to work. The morning passed in a blur of decisions, phone calls, and strategy meetings. Emma had quickly adapted to the fast pace of this new life, and she was starting to feel more confident in her role. She had an eye for detail, and her suggestions were often met with approval. But there was something more than just the business side of things that had been drawing her closer to Dante. It wasn't just the respect. It was the connection. She had never imagined she would have this kind of relationship with someone like him. A man so powerful, so dangerous, yet somehow, she felt safe in his presence. She knew she could never let her guard down entirely, not in this world. But with Dante, she was starting to believe that maybe, just maybe, there was more to him than the cold, ruthless exterior he projected. As the meeting came to a close, Dante leaned back in his chair, his gaze fixed on Emma. You've done well today, he said, his voice softer than usual. I'm glad you're here. You've earned more than just my trust. You've earned my respect. Emma smiled, a feeling of warmth spreading through her chest. She had worked hard to prove herself, and hearing those words from him made everything worth it. Thank you, she said quietly. I'm just doing my job. Dante nodded, but his expression grew more serious. I want you to know something, he said, his tone shifting slightly. This life we lead, it's not easy. It's dangerous. But I need you to know that I will always protect you, no matter what happens. Emma's heart skipped a beat at his words. She hadn't expected him to say that. Protection in this world was a rare thing, and hearing it from him made her feel something she couldn't quite describe. I don't need protection, she said softly. I can take care of myself. Dante's gaze softened. I know you can. But this isn't just about being able to take care of yourself. It's about knowing you don't have to do it alone. Emma felt a lump form in her throat at his words. She had spent so long trying to survive on her own, trying to keep her distance from everyone, from everything. But now, with Dante, there was a sense of security she had never known before. It was as if for the first time in her life, she wasn't just fighting for survival. She was fighting for something more, something worth fighting for. Thank you, she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. Dante gave her a small smile, his usual cool demeanor returning. Don't thank me yet, he said. We've got a long road ahead of us. But you're not alone anymore. As Emma left the office that day, the weight of his words lingered in her mind. She had never imagined this kind of life for herself, never imagined she would be standing in this position, trusted and respected by the most dangerous man in the city. But here she was, and she was determined to make the most of it. She wasn't just going to survive in this world. She was going to thrive in it. And with Dante by her side, she believed she had a chance. The days had passed in a blur of decisions, meetings, and moments where Emma found herself questioning how quickly her life had changed. It wasn't just the work, the long hours of paperwork, or the strategic discussions she had with Dante. It was the transformation inside her. She wasn't just a maid anymore. She wasn't just surviving. She was building something that felt like it might actually last. But it wasn't without its challenges. The world she had stepped into, the world of power, control, and ruthless ambition, was one that required constant vigilance. There were moments when Emma would catch herself, looking over her shoulder, wondering if her sudden rise in the ranks would draw unwanted attention. In the back of her mind, the fear always lingered. What would happen if she made one wrong move? What if Dante's trust in her was misplaced? But every time those doubts crept in, she reminded herself of what she had already done, how far she had come. She wasn't the same woman who had walked into the mansion months ago. She had proven herself. She was capable, and the respect she had earned from Dante was real. One morning, Dante called her into his office again. The air was thick with the scent of coffee, and the soft hum of the mansion was barely noticeable. Emma stepped in, feeling the usual rush of anticipation mixed with a hint of nerves. This time, however, something was different. Dante wasn't sitting behind his desk, but standing near the window, staring out into the city. There was a quiet intensity about him, something she hadn't seen before. "You're early," he said, without turning to face her. Emma smiled slightly. "I like to be prepared." He turned around, his usual composed expression softening ever so slightly. "I'm glad to hear that. I need you to take the lead on something important today," he said, his tone steady, but with a hint of seriousness. Emma's heart picked up its pace. "What is it?" "We're preparing to make a move," Dante replied, walking over to the desk and pulling out a few files. "It's delicate, but I need someone I trust to handle it. Someone who won't make any mistakes." Emma stepped forward, her mind racing. "What kind of move?" Dante's eyes met hers, his gaze sharp and focused. "There are people who think they can challenge us. People who are testing the waters, trying to destabilize things. I'm not going to let that happen. But I need someone on the inside to handle things before it escalates." Emma nodded slowly, taking in his words. "You want me to act as a liaison?" "Not just a liaison," Dante said, his voice low and deliberate. "I want you to make the first move. I trust you to handle this discreetly." Emma paused for a moment, the weight of his words settling in. It wasn't just about the business anymore. This was a test of her loyalty, her ability to make decisions on her own. She had been given the opportunity to prove herself in a way that no one else in the mansion ever had. "You're confident in me," she said quietly. Dante's lips curved into a faint smile. "I'm not just confident. Emma, I believe in you. You've earned my trust, and I'm giving you this chance because I know you won't let me down." Emma took a deep breath. She knew that this was a pivotal moment. The choice she made now would define her future in this world. She wasn't sure what was ahead, but she knew that she couldn't hesitate. "I won't let you down," she said, her voice steady and determined. "I'll handle it." Dante nodded, his eyes narrowing slightly as he handed her the files. "Good. I'll be here if you need anything, but I'm counting on you. Take care of it, and things will go smoothly." As Emma left the office, she felt a rush of adrenaline. She was stepping into a new role, a role where her decisions would matter. There was no turning back now. She knew the stakes were high, but for the first time, she felt ready. She had learned so much over the past few months. She had learned that power wasn't just about what you controlled, but about how you used what you had. She had learned that trust could be earned, and once it was, it could open doors that she had never imagined. Emma walked down the hallway, the files in her hands. She could feel the weight of them, both physically and metaphorically. They represented more than just paperwork. They represented her future, and she was determined to prove that she was worthy of the trust that Dante had placed in her. She had come so far, and she wasn't going to let anything or anyone stop her now. Emma had spent the last few days quietly absorbing the details of her new role. She had done what was asked of her, but there was always a sense of anticipation in the air. Something was coming. Dante had given her the responsibility of handling a delicate situation, one that required not just intelligence, but intuition. The files in her hands were no longer just documents. They were the key to what could be the next step in her life, in this world that had once seemed so foreign to her. The morning air was crisp as Emma walked through the mansion's grand entrance. The marble floors echoed under her shoes, and the lavish furnishings around her reminded her just how much had changed in such a short time. She was no longer the invisible maid. She had a role now, one that made her an integral part of the decisions that shaped this world. As she approached the office, she could feel her heart beating faster. She knew what was expected of her, but that didn't make it any easier. The stakes were higher now, and the risks were real. When she opened the door, Dante was already standing by the window, his back to her. The light of the morning sun was casting shadows across the room, and for a moment, Emma just stood there, watching him. He had been a constant presence in her life since that fateful day when everything changed. The man who had once seemed untouchable was now someone she had come to respect, to rely on. "You're here," Dante said, his voice calm, but there was an edge to it, something that hinted at the gravity of the situation. "I need you to take the lead on this." Emma stepped forward, closing the door behind her. "What do you need me to do?" she asked, her voice steady but her mind racing. Dante turned to face her, his expression serious. "I've had some reports about a rival group trying to make a move on our operations. We need to act fast, but I don't want to make any mistakes. I need someone I can trust to handle this quietly and efficiently." Emma nodded, the weight of his words sinking in. "You've trusted me before," she said, her voice firm. "I won't let you down." Dante's eyes met hers, and for a brief moment, there was something softer in his gaze, something that wasn't just about business. "I know you won't," he replied, his voice quiet but full of conviction. He handed her a folder, and Emma took it, her fingers brushing against his. The brief touch sent a jolt through her, but she quickly pushed the feeling aside. This wasn't about emotions. This was about the job. "I've arranged a meeting with a few key people," Dante continued. "I want you to sit in, observe, and handle things from there. If things get complicated, I need you to make the call. I trust you to know what to do." Emma took a deep breath, the reality of the situation settling in. This was her moment. She wasn't just here to follow orders anymore. She was here to make decisions, to take control. "I understand," she said, her voice steady. Dante gave a small nod, his expression still serious. "Good. Let's get this done." As Emma left the office, she felt the weight of the responsibility on her shoulders. This wasn't just another task, it was a test. A test of everything she had learned, of everything she had become since stepping into this world. The meeting was set for later that afternoon, and Emma knew she had to be prepared. As she made her way to the conference room, she could feel the tension in the air. The staff, the associates, the men who worked for Dante, they all knew something big was about to happen, and Emma was at the center of it. When she entered the room, she was greeted by a mix of familiar faces. There was Marco, the head of security, standing by the door with his usual stoic expression. At the table, a few of Dante's key men were already seated, talking in low voices. When they saw Emma, the room went silent. They all knew who she was, but they had never seen her in this role before. She wasn't just the maid anymore. She wasn't just someone who cleaned the rooms or served drinks. She was here to lead, to make decisions. Dante entered a few moments later, and the room immediately shifted. His presence commanded attention, but it was Emma's calm demeanor that caught the most eyes. She stood by his side, poised and ready, her mind sharp and focused on what needed to be done. The meeting was intense. Plans were discussed, strategies were laid out, and Emma contributed to the conversation more than she ever had before. She had the knowledge, the instincts, and the trust of Dante behind her. It felt empowering, but it also reminded her of just how high the stakes were. As the meeting came to a close, Dante looked at her with a small nod of approval. "You handled that well," he said quietly, his voice carrying the weight of respect. Emma smiled, a feeling of pride swelling inside her. She had done it. She had taken the lead, made the decisions, and proved that she was more than just someone who served in the background. As the day wore on, Emma found herself reflecting on just how far she had come. She had started out in this mansion as a woman trying to survive, trying to stay invisible. But now, she was part of something much bigger than herself. She was part of the Romano legacy, and she wasn't going anywhere. The days following the meeting had passed in a haze of activity and anticipation. Emma had taken charge of several key aspects of the operations, handling everything with the precision and intelligence Dante had come to rely on. But as she sat at her desk one evening, reviewing some documents, she couldn't shake the feeling that something was about to change. She had learned to trust her instincts, and right now, they were telling her that a shift was coming. A knock on the door interrupted her thoughts. "Miss Emma, the boss needs you," Marco's voice called through the door. Emma stood up immediately, the sudden tension in her chest growing. She had been so focused on her work that she hadn't noticed how quiet the house had become. She followed Marco down the hall, her mind racing with questions. As they approached Dante's office, she noticed the door was slightly ajar. The usual calm that filled the mansion felt heavier now, as if something was lurking just beneath the surface. She stepped into the room, finding Dante standing by the window, his back to her. There was something about the way he stood that told her this was no ordinary meeting. She waited a moment before speaking. "You called for me?" Dante turned slowly, his expression unreadable. "I did," he replied, his voice low. "I need you to handle something for me. It's time to take action." Emma's heart skipped a beat. There was an urgency in his voice that she had never heard before. "What is it?" she asked, keeping her tone steady. Dante stepped forward, handing her a set of documents. "I've been tracking the situation. The rivals who've been testing us, they've made their move. We need to counter it before they gain any ground." Emma took the papers from him, scanning through them quickly. It was clear this wasn't just a matter of business. It was personal. She could see the names of individuals she recognized, players in the underground world that Dante had worked so hard to control. "I want you to lead the response," Dante continued. "This is your chance to prove that you're ready for what's ahead." Emma looked up, meeting his eyes. There was no hesitation in his gaze, only trust. He believed in her. And in that moment, Emma realized just how far she had come. This wasn't just a task she had been assigned. This was a test of her abilities, her loyalty, and her resolve. "I won't let you down," she said quietly, her voice full of determination. Dante nodded, his gaze softening just a fraction. "I know you won't." Emma's pulse quickened as she took the documents and headed for the door. She had a plan in mind, but now, she had to execute it. The next few hours would be crucial. As she walked through the mansion, she couldn't help but think about how far she had come since the first day she arrived. She had gone from being an invisible servant to someone who had earned the trust of one of the most powerful men in the world. She had a place in his empire now, a place where her decisions mattered. But with that came the weight of responsibility. And Emma was ready. She knew what needed to be done, and she wasn't going to waste any time. When she arrived at the meeting point, she was greeted by Marco and a few of Dante's most trusted men. They stood in a well-lit room, their expressions serious, their postures tense. Emma took a deep breath, stepping forward with the confidence she had gained over the last few months. "We've got one shot at this," she said, her voice commanding. "We can't afford to make any mistakes." She quickly went over the details of the plan, outlining the steps they needed to take to counter the rival group's move. It was a delicate situation, one that required precision and timing. But Emma was confident. She had been preparing for this moment, studying every detail, every angle. She had learned everything she could about the rivals they were up against, and she knew exactly how to handle it. As the team set the plan into motion, Emma stood back, watching as everything fell into place. The tension in the room was palpable, but she remained calm. She had done this before, in smaller ways, but now, the stakes were higher. She could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on her. When it was time to act, Emma didn't hesitate. She gave the signal, and the team moved with precision, executing their plan flawlessly. Everything went according to plan. The rival group was caught off guard. Their move thwarted before it could gain any momentum. Emma stood in the background, watching as her team took control of the situation. Her mind raced with the realization that this was her doing. She had led them, and they had followed her without question. She had earned their trust, just as Dante had trusted her. When it was all over, Dante arrived, his usual composed demeanor masking the relief in his eyes. He gave Emma a look, one of quiet approval, and nodded. "Well done," he said, his voice steady. "You've proven yourself." Emma felt a surge of pride. It wasn't just about the victory, it was about how she had gotten there. She had earned this moment, earned Dante's trust, earned the right to stand alongside him as an equal. She wasn't just surviving anymore. She was thriving. And as she stood there, surrounded by the men who had once seen her as just another maid, Emma knew that her future in this world was no longer uncertain. She was in control, and nothing was going to stop her now. The days following the success of Emma's plan felt like a turning point. She had proven herself, not just to Dante, but to the entire network of people around him. It wasn't just about completing a task. It was about showing them that she was capable of navigating this world on her own, making decisions, and standing her ground. Emma felt different. There was a confidence in her now that hadn't been there before. She was no longer the invisible maid, the one who cleaned and served. She was a trusted member of Dante's world, someone who was integral to the workings of his empire. Yet, as much as things had changed, as much as she had grown into her new role, there was still a sense of unease that lingered in the back of her mind. The world she had entered was not one where you could afford to relax. Power, even when you had it, was fleeting. Emma knew that better than anyone. She had seen the way the dynamics shifted, the way alliances could change in the blink of an eye. One wrong move, and everything could come crashing down. She had seen it in the people who had come before her, in those who had trusted the wrong people or made one fatal mistake. But Emma wasn't like them. She knew that now. She wasn't just a survivor. She was someone who could thrive in this world. And she was determined to make sure that nothing, not even the people who wanted to tear everything down, could take that away from her. It was late one evening when Dante called her into his office again. This time, there was no urgency in his voice, no crisis to handle. But the way he looked at her when she walked in told her that this was something important. "Close the door, Emma," he said, his tone calm but serious. She did as instructed, the soft click of the door closing behind her making the air in the room feel heavier. She turned to face him, noticing the faint hint of tension in his posture. "What's going on?" she asked, her voice steady. Dante didn't answer right away. He was standing by his desk, looking out the window. His expression was unreadable, and for a moment, Emma wondered what was on his mind. Finally, he spoke, his voice softer than usual. "I've been thinking," he said, still not looking at her. "About everything. About how far you've come. And about where this is going." Emma's heart skipped a beat. She had never seen him like this before, open, vulnerable even. It was as if, for a brief moment, the power and control he had built his empire on had softened, revealing something else beneath. Something real. "You've proven yourself more than I ever expected, Emma," he continued, finally turning to face her. "But I need to ask you something." She met his gaze, not sure what to expect. "What is it?" "I need you to stay with me," Dante said, his voice steady but full of conviction. "Not just in this position, but in everything that's coming. The choices we're going to make in the future, they're going to shape everything. And I need someone I can trust by my side. Someone like you." Emma blinked, stunned by his words. She had never imagined this moment, never expected to hear Dante speak to her like this. "You've always been a part of this," he continued, taking a step closer to her. "But I want you to be more than just a player in this game. I want you to be someone who helps shape what comes next. Someone who sees the bigger picture." Emma's mind was racing. She had already given so much to this world, and now he was asking her to give even more. It wasn't just about the work. It was about everything. It was about trust, loyalty, and a commitment to something bigger than herself. "What are you asking me to do?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "I'm asking you to be part of my inner circle," Dante replied, his eyes intense. "I need someone who understands how this world works, who understands what's at stake. You've already proven that you're that person, but I need you to take that step with me." Emma felt the weight of his words sink in. She had always known that this world was one of risks, of choices that had to be made in the blink of an eye. But this was different. This wasn't just about surviving. This was about becoming someone who had the power to influence the future, to shape the world around her. And as much as it terrified her, Emma knew that this was the next step in her journey. "I'll do it," she said, her voice firm with determination. Dante's expression softened, and for a brief moment, he seemed to relax, as if a burden had been lifted from his shoulders. "I knew you would," he said quietly. "I've seen it in you from the start. You're not just a survivor, Emma. You're a force to be reckoned with." The words hit her harder than she expected. She had always doubted herself, always wondered if she had what it took to truly belong in this world. But now, with Dante's trust, with his belief in her, she felt something shift inside her. She wasn't just a maid anymore. She wasn't just a part of the background. She was part of the story, part of the future. And for the first time in her life, she knew that she was exactly where she was meant to be. The weeks following Dante's request had passed quickly, each day filled with more responsibilities, more decisions, and more moments that proved how far Emma had come. She was no longer just someone who followed orders. She was leading, guiding, and shaping the future of the Romano Empire in ways she never imagined. The mansion, which once felt like a cold, distant place, had become her home, her domain, in a way. Dante had kept his promise. He trusted her. And with that trust came an entirely new set of expectations. The quiet moments they shared had become rare, but when they did happen, they meant more than ever. There was a connection between them, something deeper than just business. They had both worked hard to get to this point, but Emma knew that this was just the beginning. There would be challenges ahead, challenges that would test everything she had learned, everything she had fought for. One evening, as Emma walked through the mansion, she noticed the slight shift in the atmosphere. There was a tension in the air, something she couldn't quite put her finger on. It was as if everyone was waiting for something to happen. The staff moved with purpose, their usual quiet hum now replaced by a sense of urgency. When Emma entered Dante's office, she found him standing by the window, looking out at the city. His posture was tense, his jaw tight. He turned when he heard her footsteps, his eyes narrowing slightly as they met hers. "What's going on?" Emma asked, her voice steady, though she could feel the weight of his gaze. Dante didn't answer right away. Instead, he walked over to the desk and picked up a file, handing it to her without a word. Emma glanced down at the papers, quickly scanning through them. Her eyes caught a name she recognized. One of their rivals, someone they had been watching for weeks. "This," Dante said, his voice low, "isn't just a business move. It's a declaration of war. They're coming after us, and I need to be ready. I need you to be ready." Emma's heart skipped a beat. This wasn't just about business anymore. This was something bigger. "What do you need me to do?" she asked, her voice calm, but with an edge of determination. Dante looked at her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. "I need you to take the lead on this. You know the game. You know how to play it. I'm putting everything in your hands. I trust you to handle this." Emma's mind raced. She had prepared for moments like this, but the reality of it, the weight of Dante's trust, felt heavier than anything she had experienced before. She was about to step into a world of danger, a world where one wrong move could change everything. But this was her world now. She wasn't going to let fear control her. "I won't let you down," she said firmly. Dante gave her a small nod, his eyes softening ever so slightly. "I know you won't." The next few days were a blur of meetings, strategy sessions, and decisions that were more critical than any she had made before. Emma's mind was sharp, her instincts guiding her every move as she worked to secure their position. She knew the stakes, knew the risks, and was prepared to face them head-on. But even with all the planning, all the preparations, there was still a feeling of unease that lingered in the back of her mind. It wasn't just the rival group's moves that concerned her, it was the uncertainty of what would happen next. She couldn't afford to let her guard down. She couldn't afford to trust anyone completely. As she sat in her office late one evening, reviewing the final details of their plan, a knock on the door interrupted her thoughts. It was Marco, his usual stoic expression on his face. "The boss wants to see you," he said, his voice neutral but with a hint of urgency. Emma stood up immediately, her mind already racing. She knew what this was about. The final phase was about to begin. When she entered Dante's office, he was already at the desk, looking over more documents. He glanced up at her as she stepped in, his eyes locking onto hers with an intensity that sent a ripple of anticipation through her. "We're ready," he said simply. "We move tomorrow. I need you to be there, every step of the way." Emma nodded, her resolve firm. "I'll be there." The tension in the air was palpable as the day of the operation arrived. Emma stood alongside Dante, watching as the final details were put into place. This was no longer just about business. This was about survival, about securing their future and making sure their empire remained unshaken. As they made their move, Emma couldn't help but feel a surge of pride. She wasn't just a part of this anymore. She was leading it. She was making the decisions, executing the plan, and watching as everything fell into place. Dante had trusted her with this responsibility, and she wasn't going to let him down. When it was all over, when the dust had settled and their position was secure, Dante turned to her, his gaze softening just a fraction. "You did it," he said quietly. "You've proven once again that I was right to trust you." Emma's chest swelled with pride, but there was something else there too, a feeling she couldn't quite describe. It was more than just the success of the mission. It was the realization that she had earned her place in this world, that she had earned Dante's respect and trust. And as she stood there, looking at the man who had once been a distant figure in her life, she knew that this was just the beginning. She had proven herself, but now there was nothing standing in her way. She was part of this world, and she was going to make sure it stayed that way. The days that followed the success of their last operation were filled with a sense of accomplishment and a quiet unease. Emma had taken the reins with ease, making decisions that had cemented her place as Dante's trusted right hand. She had always known she was capable, but now she was seeing it in action. The world that once felt so foreign, so daunting, had become hers to navigate. But even as she stood at the top, looking down at everything she had built, she couldn't help but feel the weight of what lay ahead. This was a world of constant motion, and every victory came with a new challenge. As Emma walked through the mansion, her steps echoing off the marble floors, she couldn't shake the feeling that the calmness of the past few days was just the calm before the storm. She had been given everything she needed to succeed, but there was always something lurking just beneath the surface. Dante's world was one of shadows, of power struggles and hidden threats, and Emma knew better than to think that everything would stay smooth for long. The mansion was quieter than usual as she entered Dante's office. He was sitting at his desk, papers scattered around him, his usual calm demeanor hiding the tension in his eyes. When he saw her enter, he didn't smile, but there was a flicker of recognition in his gaze. He knew what she was capable of. He trusted her, but there was something else there, something unspoken. "You're here," he said, his voice steady, though there was a hint of something else beneath it. "I need you to prepare for something." Emma stood straighter, sensing the change in the air. "What's going on?" she asked, her voice calm, but her mind already working. Dante leaned back in his chair, his gaze still fixed on her. "It's time to deal with the last of our rivals," he said, his tone more serious than usual. "They've been lying low for a while, but I have reason to believe they're about to make their move. I need you to make sure we're ready." Emma's heart rate picked up, but she kept her composure. "What do you need me to do?" Dante stood, walking over to the window and staring out at the city. The quiet was heavy, as if the world outside was waiting for something to happen. "I need you to help me set up the strategy," he said. "We can't afford to let them get too close. This isn't just about business anymore. This is personal." Emma nodded, her mind already working through the details. She had never backed down from a challenge, and this time, she knew she would have to be even more careful than before. The stakes were higher, and the consequences more severe. She could feel the weight of it all. "We'll need to move quickly," Emma said, her voice steady. "I'll get everything in place." Dante turned to face her, his expression unreadable. "Good. I knew I could count on you." He stepped closer, his gaze never leaving hers. For a moment, the space between them felt charged, but Emma pushed the feeling aside. This wasn't the time to get distracted. "We've got one shot at this," Emma continued, her voice firm. "We can't afford to make any mistakes." Dante nodded, his expression shifting. "I'll be right there with you," he said. "But I need you to lead this. You know how to handle it." Emma felt a surge of pride, but she didn't let it show. She had worked hard to get here, and now it was her time to shine. She wasn't just a part of the plan anymore. She was the one making the decisions. The days leading up to the operation were filled with strategy sessions, preparations, and careful planning. Emma worked tirelessly, coordinating with the team and making sure every detail was in place. She wasn't about to let anything slip through the cracks. As the time drew closer, Emma could feel the tension in the air. The moment had arrived. Dante's world was about to shift again, and this time, Emma was the one pulling the strings. She stood in the control room, watching the live feeds as her team moved into position. The plan was set, the pieces in place. It was time to act. She looked at Dante, who was standing just a few feet away. His usual calm demeanor was gone, replaced by something else, something more intense. He trusted her, and she knew she couldn't let him down. "We're ready," Emma said, her voice steady. Dante gave her a small, approving nod. Then let's do this. The operation went smoothly, everything falling into place as they had planned. There were no surprises, no setbacks. Emma moved with precision, making decisions in real time, guiding the team with a confidence that came from knowing exactly what needed to be done. When it was over and the dust had settled, Emma stood in the control room, the weight of the mission lifting from her shoulders. Dante walked in, his usual calm return, but there was something else in his eyes. Something that said he was proud. "You did it," he said quietly. Emma looked at him, her heart swelling with pride. "We did it," she corrected. Dante gave her a small smile, one that meant more than any words he could have said. "You led this, Emma. You're more than just part of this. You're the one making it happen." Emma felt a sense of accomplishment settle over her, but it was tempered with the realization that this was just the beginning. She had proven herself, but now, she was in deeper than ever before. She wasn't just surviving in Dante's world anymore. She was shaping it. And as she looked at him, standing there with quiet admiration in his eyes, she knew that she was exactly where she was meant to be. The weeks following the successful operation brought a sense of calm, but also a strange stillness that Emma had never felt before. She had moved past the stage of proving herself, yet the weight of everything she had achieved began to settle in her chest. It wasn't the power she had gained that caused her to feel this way. It was the responsibility that came with it. Dante had placed his trust in her, and with each passing day, that trust grew stronger. He saw her as someone who wasn't just a part of the machinery of his world, but as someone who could influence its future. Emma had earned her place, not by chance, but through her actions, her decisions, and her ability to think beyond the surface. But even with everything falling into place, there were moments when doubt crept in. The reality of the world she had stepped into was always present, lurking just beneath the surface. It wasn't a world for the faint of heart, and Emma knew she had to remain vigilant. As much as she had come to trust Dante, she understood that the world they lived in was unpredictable. She had seen firsthand how quickly things could change, how swiftly alliances could shift, and how quickly power could slip from your grasp. The mansion had become a second home to her, but the shadows of the past were never far behind. One evening, after a long day of meetings, Emma sat in her office, the faint glow of the desk lamp illuminating the papers in front of her. The quiet of the mansion was almost oppressive as she focused on her work. She had just signed off on the final report when her phone buzzed. It was a message from Dante. "Meet me in my office. We need to talk." Emma's heart skipped a beat. It wasn't unusual for Dante to call her into his office, but there was something about the brevity of the message that made her uneasy. She stood, straightening her blouse as she walked toward his office. The hallways of the mansion seemed eerily quiet as she moved through them. When she reached the door, she paused for a moment, taking a deep breath. She had come to learn that moments like this, moments when Dante asked to speak with her privately, were never without purpose. She knocked softly, and Dante's voice called out from the other side. "Come in." She opened the door, stepping into the room. Dante was standing by the window, his posture rigid, his gaze fixed on the city skyline. There was a tension in the air that Emma could feel as soon as she entered. "Is everything okay?" she asked, her voice steady, though she couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. Dante turned slowly, his eyes meeting hers. "I need to know you're ready," he said, his voice low, but filled with a weight that made Emma pause. "Ready for what?" she asked, her mind racing. Dante's gaze softened, but the seriousness in his expression remained. "Things are shifting. I've been making moves, but there are still pieces to put into place. And I need someone I can trust to take over when the time comes." Emma's heart began to race. The implication was clear. Dante was preparing for the next phase, but that next phase involved more than just the operations. It involved a deeper level of trust, a level where Emma would have to take the reins entirely. "You want me to take control?" she asked, though she already knew the answer. Dante nodded slowly. "I trust you, Emma. You've proven yourself time and time again. But this is different. The decisions we make in the next few weeks will shape everything. And I need you to be ready to step up when the time comes." The weight of his words sank in, and for a moment, Emma was silent. She had always been ready for the challenge, but now, it felt different. This wasn't just about making decisions on the fly or handling the day-to-day operations. This was about stepping into a new role, a role where her influence would be felt beyond just the tasks she handled. It was about shaping the future of the Empire in a way that would leave a permanent mark. "I'm ready," Emma said, her voice steady with resolve. "I've been ready for this." Dante studied her for a long moment, his eyes narrowing slightly, as if he were weighing her words carefully. Finally, he nodded. "I know you are. But I need to be sure you understand what this means." Emma took a step forward, her mind clear. "I understand, Dante. I understand what's at stake, and I understand the responsibility that comes with this." Dante walked over to his desk and sat down, motioning for Emma to take the seat across from him. "Good," he said. "Because once we start down this path, there's no going back. It's not just about keeping the power we have, it's about expanding it. About solidifying our position, making sure no one can threaten what we've built." Emma listened carefully, her mind already working through the details. She had always known that the world they lived in was full of danger, but now, more than ever, it felt like the stakes were higher than ever before. "I'm with you," she said quietly, her voice filled with certainty. "Whatever happens, I'm with you." Dante looked at her, a faint smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. "I know," he said softly, "and that's why I trust you." The weight of the moment hung in the air between them, and for the first time, Emma realized that the journey she had started was far from over. This was just the beginning. She wasn't just going to survive in this world, she was going to change it. With Dante by her side, she had the chance to shape the future, and she wasn't going to let that opportunity slip away.